years, they would replace the existing Chapter 11 medical marijuana ordinance. So with that, we have a special guest here.
Certainly, we've at least a couple council meetings ago, Chairman Geis suggested it might be a good idea to talk to somebody from City of Westland who has a marijuana ordinance. Who's been tested in court and spent a long time going through that, so he suggested having somebody from Westland come to one of our study sessions. And as I looked into it, actually I know the city attorney from Westland, Jim Poisson. Then when I realized that Brandon Risco was from his office, Brandon's been kind of the guy. He's active in the Michigan Municipal League as I am, and Michigan Municipal League. Anytime anybody in that group, those municipal attorneys have a question about marijuana, Brandon always seems to be the answer. So I think a lot of municipal attorneys across the state of Michigan have been looking to Brandon for answers. So as it turned out, it was just coincidence that he also happened to be one of the city attorneys for Westland. But I'm glad to have him tonight. I've asked Brandon to give us kind of a broad picture and a broad overview of the whole marijuana process of adopting an ordinance and what's on, in addition to focus on some of the pros and cons that Westland faced in going through this. So for the benefit of refreshing everybody's memory, because we haven't looked at this in over a year, and for the benefit of newer people on the council, I think it's good to have this thorough background. I'll let Brandon take over.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. Thank you. I appreciate the introduction, the kind words, and I thank the council and the mayor and Ed for having me out here to talk to everybody about municipal marijuana regulations in the city of Taylor and what that might look like. I do want to be clear, though. I'm not here to try and sell the city in any particular direction. My goal here tonight is simply just to provide a bit of education, a bit of an overview of what the process could look like, and to inform the council as to what it might look like to make a decision to move in the direction of marijuana. And if you do choose to move in that direction because you think it's the right move for your community, then to show how we might go through that process and what the sort of decision tree, so to speak, might look like. I'm with the law firm Fossil & Bond. As Ed said, we're based in Northville. We do a fair bit of municipal work, including special projects and things like that. And I've been knee-deep in pun intended, I've been breathing marijuana for the last 3 years or so. It's certainly an interesting and developing area, so I look forward to talking about that tonight and hopefully provide some good talking points and education for the council here. And please, if the council or the administration has any questions while I'm going through, feel free to stop me and ask your questions subject to whatever your council procedures are, of course, through the chair. So just to overview sort of the current state of affairs. In 2008, the voters approved the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, and this was what most people sort of refer to as the caregiver-patient model. So in preparation for this meeting, I did do an overview sort of the existing ordinances that are in place in Taylor, and I noted that Taylor has an ordinance that purports to regulate medical marijuana in the caregiver context. Seems to primarily be relegated to the patient or caregiver's residence, sort of as a residential, non-commercial opportunity. Then in 2016, the Michigan legislature, seeing that this medical marijuana caregiver model was somewhat of a disaster, with communities that had, in certain places, adopted their own regulatory scheme for dispensaries and things of that nature, there was really no overarching regulation for medical marijuana for the caregiver system. And so what the legislature did in Michigan was adopt the Medical Marijuana Facilities and Licensing Act, which approved the commercial style dispensaries and medical marijuana operations that we're much more familiar with today, probably, than we are with the Medical Marijuana Act caregiver type grows. As I go through the Taylor ordinance, I noted that and was somewhat surprised, in fact, to see that you guys already had a scheme for regulating medical marijuana in place, and that it's limited to the industrial zoning districts, Can't be located within 1,000 feet of particular land uses. Limited to 2 provisioning centers, 6 growers broken out, as you see on the slide here, 2 processors, a safety compliance facility, and a secure transporter. So I understand that the city and the council probably has some familiarity, at least, with what an ordinance could look like. But what's next? In 2018, back at the ballot box, the voters adopted the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. This is the law responsible for the adult use or recreational marijuana establishments that we see throughout the state here in many communities. As I'm sure everybody is at least somewhat aware, communities have the opportunity to either not do anything, in which case they would potentially be subject to applicants going to the state directly, submitting an application and getting licensed to operate in that community. You saw other communities, Taylor among them, passed an ordinance to affirmatively opt out before that could happen. And then there were other communities that, before the drop dead date, so to speak, passed ordinances that allowed for the regulation and licensing of marijuana at the local level for adult use establishments. So just by way of talking about some of the different recreational adult uses that are out there, I think a lot of the conversation tends to steer towards the retail uses, commonly referred to maybe as a dispensary, also known in the medical context as a provisioning center. So when you hear those terms, retailer, provisioning center, dispensary, those terms are often used interchangeably for the retail type use. Of course, a retail license being specific to the adult use context or the recreational context rather than the medical context. A lot of the licenses that were developed through the adult use process are equivalent type licenses, right? So you have medical growers, you have adult use growers, you have medical processors, you have adult use processors. We already talked about retailers and provisioning centers. There were a couple new licenses that were implemented as well. One being the marijuana micro business, which allows for a 150 plant grow operation combined with processing and retailing from that location. We also see designated consumption establishments, which are adult use on-premise consumption establishments, and then the ability to do marijuana events, you know, like a hash bash or something like that. And so those types of temporary events also will be allowed under a potential regulatory scheme adopted by the city. So as part of this process, I thought it'd be beneficial for everybody to have an idea of what's around Taylor. Anybody can go on to the state of Michigan. The Marijuana Regulatory Agency maintains a pretty comprehensive website that has an interactive GIS type map where you can go on and do a search. So what I did here was I screenshot Taylor, and I did a search for all retail type licenses. So that'd be medical provision centers and adult use retailers. And we can see here that you see some up in the Lincoln Park, of course, River Rouge area, some in Wayne, Inkster type area, but really not a whole lot, nothing in Taylor, obviously. We see Allen Park, South Cable Line, down Riverview, all the other downriver type communities appear to be either opted out or maybe they don't have facilities operating for whatever reason. I suspect most of them are opted out. So,
Just a quick question. So we've got the medical. Do we ever have anybody apply under the medical marijuana? Nobody ever apply. Okay. And if, I'm not sure if you're getting feedback from here. No. Yeah, I'm not sure. Is that okay for the audience? I thought I heard some.
Yeah, we can hear a little bit.
You're fine? All right. All right, thank you.
I'm going to move this a little bit closer here, and then maybe hopefully make sure everybody can hear me well. So there is an excise tax associated with recreational marijuana. It's a 10% excise tax based on sales from retail locations and micro-business locations. There was kind of a lot of buzz around the excise tax when recreational marijuana, when the law first passed about